So what you just heard, I think, is an excellent segue to our keynote today. And it's really about innovation and HBCUs. This is a subject that's very important to us as AURP as we think about the future and engaging DEI in every sense, particularly as a inclusion in tech. So it's my great pleasure and honor, really, to introduce to you Tony Allen, who's a PhD president of Delaware State University, a premier HBCU in this country. He's also the chair of President Biden's Board of Advisors on HBCUs, and so you'll maybe see some of his LinkedIn stuff in Washington and so forth. He is the chief executive officer of really the nation's most diverse contemporary HBCU. That's what DSU is. It's a comprehensive research land-grant institution, home to 4 academic colleges, about 6,000 undergrads, and boasting graduate and adult programs across the state and 23 countries. In 2020, going back to Biden, Tony was named the chief executive officer of the 59th presidential inaugural. In 21, he was appointed as chair to the board I just mentioned, the HBCUs. He early on began his career, and this is where I first met him, as the first president of the Wilmington, Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League. In fact, even back then, we had the pleasure of joining arms around a workforce development opportunity, so we formed a joint venture with a grant out of Washington. Later on, he began to really move on his career. He moved into financial services and became executive vice president of MBNA of America. And after that bank was acquired by Bank of America, he led their communications for the bank's largest divisions, founding and developing the Corporate Reputation Group. He's been awarded many national honors. I can't go through all of them, but all of them have to do with leadership in racial equity. In between his appointments, and this is on the side, you don't see it very often, to president of DSU, he really spent an enormous amount of time and thought in intensive study around Wilmington's inner city issues of education, and he came forward with many recommendations that have been adopted. He owns a BA in political science, PhD in urban affairs from here, and so Tony is a blue hen, but now he's a hornet. So we have weird mascots in Delaware. That's all I can say. So if you welcome to the podium, Dr. Tony Allen.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. Appreciate our friendship for so long. Welcome, everybody, to Delaware State University North. I get to say that because I went here. Very excited to be here and to be talking about such a special set of institutions in our country. Before I begin, I want to tell you 2 stories. You heard that I'm a recovering banker. I spent 15 years. You laughed at that. I spent 15 years at Bank of America and MBNA. I'm in a variety of activities and was really moved by my time there, mostly because it really propelled me into what I am doing now, which some of you I would imagine think is pretty odd. How you propel from banking into higher ed. But what I can tell you is good corporate citizens do 3 things well. They do the job in front of them, so make good on their brand promise. They're able to utilize in a very deep way the expertise, the subject matter expertise of their various disciplines for the betterment of society. And they look like the customers and clients they serve up and down the company. And I had the opportunity to actually make that a part of my portfolio at then Bank of America, and have used that as really a baseline for how I talked with a lot of C-suite executives who are really interested in the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So when I got to Delaware State University, I was provost, and It's probably the 5th day on the job. Young man walks in to my office and says, I need to see Dr. Allen. My assistant says, do you have an appointment? He said, no, like most college students. She said, Dr. Allen's very busy. He said, I'll wait. And he waited for an hour. And when I finally got to him, he was quiet and shy, really quiet and shy. And I said, young man, how can I help you? And still no answer, just sitting there. Young man, how can I help you? He said, Dr. Allen, one of my mentors at the Browns Boys and Girls Club, which is a local boys club right up the street here, said when you arrived, you should go see him. I said, young man, how can I help you? He said, I'm homeless. I said, young man, how long have you been homeless? He said, since I was a sophomore in high school. I said, what year are you in now at Delaware State? He said, I'm a sophomore here. So ladies and gentlemen, think for a moment what it takes for a sophomore in high school, homeless, to think about college, then apply to college, get into college, and never tell another soul about his plight for 2 more years while he was in college. Immediately I said, look, we're going to get you housing. You're going to work for me for the rest of your time at Delaware State, and I'm going to keep an eye on you. He graduated several years ago. That young man is an inner city teacher in a Baltimore public school now. And one of the reasons I tell you that is because, in my view, I believe that's what the secret sauce of historically black colleges and universities are. Now, I will tell you, we have varying levels of promising students. So those who could go anywhere, literally anywhere, but also those who are first-generation college students from low-resource communities, maybe were under-attended to in their K-12 education and just need an open door. And for my money, that's how you create a real society of citizens. That it is, in fact, a melting pot that we preach about so very often. And while we've been able to do that for over 175 years, we have always done, not surprisingly to anybody in this room that knows HBCUs, more with less. There are only 3% of all 4-year college universities in the country, only 3% are HBCUs. We still produce nearly 20% of all black graduates in the country. And if you go through most of the disciplines, law, science, medicine, we are punching materially above our weight, which is to say 25% of all STEM graduates start at an HBCU. 80% of all medical doctors who are of color start at an HBCU. So my issue, and I do have an issue that I travel around with, my issue is when folks don't, one, know enough about HBCUs, and in the same breath say, and I hear this a lot, Tony, I want to find more black talent. I don't know where to look. I usually say, well, you're probably not looking hard enough. HBCUs alone, 101 of them are producing 325,000 black graduates every year across every discipline. And that's just HBCUs. So when I had the opportunity and got the invitation from Mike to be here, I thought it was really important, one, to tell you that story about that young man, and two, to make sure you knew that we can be real partners in the process. But we have to know you, and you have to know us. So as I said, I believe that historically black colleges and universities are the best return on investment in higher education, full stop. That means if you believe in all access, equal access for all in this grand country of ours, this is the best return on investment in higher education. You can see our products. You can also see that we're an economic engine, which we don't talk about enough, $15 billion of direct economic impact, and also materially punching above our weight in nearly every discipline you could imagine. More notably, if you also believe in economic mobility, and I imagine some of you came from some tough circumstances. I don't know about you, but I was a first-generation college student from a low-resource family. I'm sure some of you in this room can relate to that. So getting the opportunity to come to a place like Delaware State is important to all of my students. And one of the reasons is because when African-American students in particular attend other colleges and universities, the economic mobility rate is less than half of what they're going to get at an HBCU, which is to say that they're more likely to successfully matriculate, graduate, and find professional careers in the right ways. This is just another way of looking at it. And you can see all of the HBCU averages from a mobility rate standpoint versus non-college HBCUs, and all higher eds and Ivy. It is very, very important that you recognize this run point. How many of you, by show of hands, would like to see in your various disciplines more people of color in those disciplines? For those of you who did not raise your hand, I want to talk to you out back, okay? If you want that, and I know you do, there are three things I would say that you have to really think about. First is, what's the pipeline? What's the pipeline? I am proud to say this, wasn't always proud, but my mother was a single mom. Got kicked out of a Florida school, had to go to Newark, New Jersey to have me. Have a father who is still long-term addicted today. Somehow we got to Delaware when I was 3 years old. I have no idea, and I know she didn't have any idea, as to how we would traverse life. But there was this one program, still exists today, called the Forum to Advance Minorities in Engineering in Delaware, started by the DuPont Company in 1978. What it said was, we're going to take sixth graders of color, give them 6 additional weeks of schooling in the summer, make them come to an academy every other week during the school year, and then at the end of that process, in their 11th grade and 12th grade year, we're going to have them spend time on a university campus, right here, this university campus, actually. That was 1978. Now, I don't know about you, I have a 6th grader. They're not all that interested in spending 6 additional weeks in school. Maybe yours are, mine aren't. But I can tell you that that kid was me. And remember, it was the Forum to Advance Minorities in Engineering. I was a political science major. But what I got to do is be around people who looked like me and had an opportunity to say, this is the group, the cohort I want to be a part of. That program, still running today, has a 98% college graduation rate. 98%. It is so unique that at Delaware State University, we have what we call an early college school. So 600 students, 7th through 12th grade, all of whom can earn up to 60 college credits before they're ever admitted into any university. Think about that. If you get 60 college credits, unless you had a bad counselor, you're a second semester sophomore, first semester junior, right? We have 600 in that pipeline. In that pipeline, we've now had 4 graduating classes. 53% of those students actually come to Delaware State. Our first cohort, our valedictorian, somehow earned 73 credits at 18. She got into Delaware State, obviously we let her in. She got in a place called Spelman, some of you may know Spelman, and she got into Stanford. Every place where she got in, all those credits transferred. I will say we let her go to Stanford. But I say that because now, if you come to Delaware State or any of the other schools, you only got 2 years left. And in Delaware, for those of you who are not from Delaware, Delaware State has an Inspire scholarship, which the governor sponsored some time ago, that says if you have a 2.75, willing to do some public service while you're in school, the state will pay for your schooling. So if you have 60 college credits as a part of my K-12 program, you come to Delaware State, we give you 60 more because you're an Inspire scholar, all of a sudden you haven't paid for school and you finished 2 years earlier. Why is that important? Well, our first two graduates are now doctoral candidates in their 5th year of their quote-unquote 4-year college program. The pipeline. And I might add, the early college school is for aspiring, largely first-generation students. So one, do you believe in the pipeline? And can you help create it? That's the first thing. 2, internships at the earliest levels, experiential opportunities at the earliest levels. I can tell you for sure that most of the students that I have dealt with in my life, I'm not talking about Delaware State, I'm talking about those in Wilmington Public Schools. Wilmington is, Ty, keep me honest here, Wilmington's population is about 75,000 people, right? I don't know where all of you from, but that's a small number for us. That's also our largest city, right? The lowest advantaged of our student base, K-12 in Wilmington, the lowest advantaged have not been to our riverfront. You know where our riverfront is? It is 3 miles from the most northern part of the city. I didn't say get on an airplane. They've not been to our riverfront. So our ability to create experiential opportunities for them is real. There's a young man in Wilmington named Logan Herring, runs something called the Teen Warehouse. The Teen Warehouse is a beautiful facility built by teens for teens. It is one of the first times in the history of that city where folks are actually creating new workforce development programs for these teenagers in a way that is changing their complete mindset. Not just about college going, but about what they'll do, how they'll take the next academic step beyond their career. Pipeline, right? Experiential opportunities and commitment. What do I mean by commitment? Anybody remember the global pandemic? No, y'all missed that? It was big. It was a big deal. Here's what I thought. I became president of Delaware State University January 1, 2020. My mother always said I had perfect timing. Global pandemic hits March. I send all my students home, except for 200. Think of those 200 as that young man I just told you, is otherwise homeless without Delaware State. And we are trying to figure out how to get them back as soon as possible because we know that they are coming back to some communities that are so risky. If we don't get them back home soon, they won't come back to Delaware State. And then I'm sitting there with my wife and kids, hoping that we can stay together through this pandemic. I don't know about you, but that was rough. And watching the murder of George Floyd. Now, obviously, I'm a black man. And I know a little bit about some of these experiences based on history. But I can't tell you how many of my white allies called me just to see if I was okay. It was kind of the first time for me, there was so much care and concern for that issue, an issue we had known about for a long time in the African American community, that I thought it might be a potential shift in our country. I said many times during that process that obviously one pandemic exposed another. Why? Because we were all home. You couldn't look away from all that stuff. And then I saw these multi-million-dollar commitments specifically to HBCU'S. The young man who was just up here before was talking about some of that work. What I would tell you is we started questioning in this way. Is this a movement or a moment? Are we just responding to this one incident or these sets of incidents one time? And will the corporate community walk away after that? Is it a movement or a moment? Shortly after that, I was named to chair the President's Board of Advisors on HBCU'S. And I asked my fellow HBCU'S the same thing, movement or moment. And we all agreed that we are already in a movement. The first HBCU ever is 40 minutes from here. The second one is 10 minutes from that one, Cheyney State University and Lincoln University. We've already been around doing all the things I'm talking to you about. But the fact that folks were listening from all different walks of life means, and still means, that we have a unique responsibility to make sure that we can stop doing more with less. And one of those things was making sure that we understood the ROI. How many jobs do HBCUs generate for their regional economies? What does it mean with respect to our land holdings? What's our impact to GDP? All those things were very important to making sure that we could change the trajectory for the infusion of capital necessary for the HBCU community. And we knew we had to do that while keeping honest to who we are. You all understand what Maslow's hierarchy of needs are. That's the secret sauce to what we do. Many of our students, probably 50% in Delaware State's case, have deep physiological and safety needs because of their community. We believe that if we can bring high-quality education and loving and belonging, they'll find themselves to self-actualization. So being able to build ROI, the hard stuff, and get them up to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the more soft stuff, makes us, I believe, the best set of institutions you can imagine. And the numbers continue to bear it out. So this is just a study of basically everything you would want your college student to have at his or her college. My university prepared me well for life outside of college. I'm thriving. I have purpose. I understand my sense of community. There's financial well-being. I'm engaged. My physical well-being is in order. Note that in every case, HBCUs are performing better for their students than their peers who have those same set of students at their institutions. But the resource gap, as I've said, is significant. I won't go through these details except to say that we have 4 priorities as a result of the Advisory Council on HBCUs. First, correcting infrastructure inequities. I can tell you for sure there is no building at any HBCU in the country that looks like this. Not one. And I went here. But if you believe what I just told you, that our quality education is making a return on investment to some of the students in the most vulnerable communities in the country, we believe that the infrastructure has to match that quality education. And that's important for research parks, right? Because we want to attract the best and brightest, not only from a student perspective, but from a faculty and research perspective as well. The federal research support. One factoid that might be of interest to you, and obviously I don't know who's in the room, but there is one university in this country that each year gets more in federal funding for research and contracting opportunities than the entire 101 HBCUs. Every year. And I'm just talking about one university. So our ability to get our fair share of what we think we can do relative to research and federal support is critical to helping solve some of society's most pressing problems. Broadening financial support to students. I talked to you about innovation, experiential opportunities, and what that might mean for the students that we provide services for. And then HBCU preservation and growth. My sense is you want a healthy HBCU community, not just black folks, not just the higher ed community. America wants a healthy HBCU community. So about 3 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to talk to both President Biden and Vice President Harris about this work. Anybody ever talked to any of those two people? Mike, you've talked to everybody. Anybody else? All right, so here's what I was thinking about. And I worked for then Senator Biden long ago, in my 20s. Here's what I was thinking about trying to express these in a full-throated report we issued to him. Do not stutter. Did mess that up. Remember who they are. And make sure they understand that this is of an American consequence. So remember who they are. This is not to be political. What I would say is this administration has done more for HBCUs than any other president in American history. That's just fact. That's just fact. But what he will tell you on any given day is, one, that's not enough, and two, we can't do it alone. I do not want you to take away from any of my comments today that all you need to do is partner with our institutions. What I can tell you is, if you're partnering with some of my sister institutions like the University of Delaware, you should also be thinking about us. You should also recognize that the wealth of land opportunities we have, particularly those land grant institutions that are HBCUs, of which there are 19, are doing some exceptional work and need your support. And finally, you should also know that we want to build capacity for businesses across many disciplines to grow on our campuses. JP Morgan Chase is actually already doing a fabulous job of that right here on this campus. Every time I talk to companies, I encourage them to think about doing some work, not just with our campuses, not just in career services, but actually building capacity, physical sites on our campus. Cheney has actually done this. They have 4 partners, all of whom are mid-sized companies, who have decided to put at least a portion of their operations there. So they are literally incubating on Cheney's campus, which I think is fantastic. Here's the deal. The President Cheney says, I asked him 3 things. Every student has to have a paid internship. Every student. If you're incubating on my campus, you have to build some capacity with respect to our infrastructure. So we need you to support us on infrastructure development. And 3, if whatever you're creating on this campus does well, we'd like a piece of the pie, a revenue share. And I can tell you at Cheney, which I think is probably the best in class with respect to this effort, it is going extraordinarily well. We just need a few more partners to see how much we can grow that in that space. Outcomes. If we're able to do any of this in any substantive way, our retention goes up significantly. That means more graduates in the marketplace. Our graduation rates, particularly at HBCUs, go up significantly. And I can tell you that because we take broader chances with our student portfolio, we give ourselves some leniency on the graduation rates. So we always know that we're not going to get every student across that stage. But if we can get more than 50% of them across that stage, that's going to make a big difference to the American economy. Our funding gap, and you probably have already read some of this, there's at least a $12 billion gap with respect to some of the land grant research institutions and required funding from the state now. If we're able to close that gap, that will mean wealth creation upwards of about $181 billion. So, let me give you my final story, and I think this is important. I told you who I was quickly, what my mom did. My mom passed away in January of 21. And She was a tough old lady. And every time I think about my learnings from her, I think about this woman who, again, teenage mom, trying to figure it out, was thinking about all the shame she had to endure just to get me into some situations that would literally change my life. And then I thought about how she lived the last 20 years of her life, lifelong learner, always in school, had certification upon certification. People would come to my mother for counseling. She would say, "Tony, I'm not a counselor." I say, "Mama, you give good advice." She says, "No, I got to go to school for this." 4 months later, she would have a certification in counseling. That's just who she was. So when she passed away, I was obviously hurt, loving my life for sure, but said, what would she want me to do? So I started something called the Words Are Creative Force Scholarship Fund in her name. Why do I call it Words Are Creative Force? Because if you called Letha Allen on her old school answering machine, it would always say, "Words are creative force. Use them wisely." We're not available at this time. And I would kid her about that, but she used her words wisely. And then I thought, what if my mother, Letha Allen, had the opportunity that she gave me? Who would she have become? So when my wife and I started this Words of Creative Force Scholarship, we said, we only want those dollars to go to young women who are pregnant but want to go to college. And I remember saying out loud that I'd never want those young women to hear anything but "it's possible" and "amen." In 6 months, we raised $750,000 for that scholarship. And I'm proud to say that we gave out our first scholarship to a young lady who dropped out of school because she was pregnant, came back, is now our first Letha Scholar, has a beautiful little daughter who is my adopted niece, and will graduate this spring. And her opportunities are now completely different than they were just a year ago when she thought her life had changed in some way that could not be unchanged. I say all this to tell you that when you think about the ability to change lives across any discipline, regardless of where you come from, what you look like, who you love, think about how important it is to bring the diversity of people, experiences, and ideas into the marketplace. Think about what that will mean for our country and for our smaller, more globally connected world. And then if you have one more thought, I'd ask you to think about how you could partner with your historically Black college and university. Thank you.